Yes, indeedy, it's tonight's main event. Before the break, we were talking about the chances of Donald J. Trump becoming President of the United States for a second time. But would that occurrence be a good and net benefit for the United Kingdom? Well, Dr. Renee thinks that the world needs Donald Trump, but Benjamin Butterworth thinks Donald Duck would be a better option. Seconds out, it's round one. Lead us off, Dr. Renee.
So I do think that the world needs Donald Trump, because I think we need somebody in power in the world who is not going to continue conflicts around the world, get into conflicts. He was the president in the United States who actually didn't do it. He didn't do war. He did negotiation. He spoke to people that were deplorables, and he also spoke to the working man. What I would like is for the British government to look at Trump when he stands up and says, let's make America great again. Let's have a small state, low tax. Let's be protectionist. Let's be self-sufficient. Let's bring manufacturing purely within the walls of the United States. Let's stop illegal immigration. Let's give jobs to people here first. Let's look after ourselves. I want someone to stand up in the UK and say, let's make Britain great again by doing exactly what Donald Trump is doing. And I also think that there is a complete fear in the EU for Donald Trump winning that election, not just because of Ukraine. And I agree with the ambassador that actually Ukraine is now an unwinnable war, and only negotiation is going to bring peace and stop people dying every day. 1,000 young men a day are dying. But more than that, Europe is shaking in their boots because they're going to have to step up and look after themselves and not rely on the United States to be their army. We need Donald Trump to bring some sense back into the world. And when I say sense, I mean everyday people, not the globalists who want this big open club where only the people at the top benefit and the people at the bottom are just forgotten.
You know, my late grandmother would probably call Donald Trump. She'd have a great northern phrase that he's all fur coat and no knickers. This is a guy that likes to market himself as a strong man, as a great, powerful, strong leader. And yet, when he comes up against strong leaders, he's a pussycat. He has more in common with dictators and people that want to control their countries rather than lead them than he does European democratic leaders. And actually, I think the former US ambassador and Trump loyalist that we just had on this programme illustrated that perfectly. The vast majority of people in Britain and in Europe, and a great many in America for that matter, know that what happened when Putin invaded Ukraine was not only appalling and is losing tens of thousands of Ukrainian lives, as well as Russian soldiers that frankly have no choice in what they're doing, but it is reminiscent of what happened in the 30s in Europe. This is a megalomaniac that will not stop at Ukraine. And so if Donald Trump really had Britain's interests and Europe's interests, if he were actually a strong man, then he would stand up to a megalomaniac dictator trying to slaughter innocent people in neighbouring countries to take control. And yet he doesn't. He chooses a guy in J.D. Vance, his vice presidential candidate, who says that he doesn't give a damn what happens to Ukraine. Now, I think that Britain has a proud history of standing up to fascists and dictators, one that we talk about to this day because it changed our lives and it changed tens of millions of lives on the continent. Why on earth would we benefit from backing someone who is more Chamberlain than Churchill?
I mean, everything that you've said there is based on Ukraine. And actually, whilst I agree with you, of course, what Putin did in going into Ukraine was the most appalling thing. And it was a dictator trying to take over a country. However, it's, as I've said, it's reached a point, Benjamin, where there is no solution unless we actually want to get involved in a war, which we don't, because we barely have enough troops to even man one of our Navy ships. So we can't do that anyway. And would you want to send British young men and women off to die in Ukraine with Putin? Or should we get around the table and talk to him? And moreover, should we start looking inwards at our country and thinking how we can follow Trump and make Britain great again as it once was?
I think the problem is that I talk about Ukraine because I think it epitomises that he is weak when strength matters. He is weak in the face of people that actually challenge the Western order of events. It's things like NATO and the United Nations, which are among the great successes of Britain in the post-World War era.
But NATO
and he wants to undermine those.
But NATO's only successful because America carries it. This is the whole point. Half of the people in NATO don't even pay the bare minimum.
All right. Lynn May, what I would say to what I've heard is that, you know, throughout Europe, countries are now saying, look, we are increasing our defence spending. And that was always a Trump threat. He always said, you know, we will pull out of Europe if you don't actually put your 2.5% in. And also, he did stand up to world leaders on the world stage, so much so that I can remember the liberal global establishment saying, oh, he said that? He really said that? Because he was such a no-holds-barred president.
Yeah, I think what Benjamin is saying is you're echoing the globalists. I think you're echoing those in power. I think you're echoing those of privilege. I think the average, everyday working man is sick to the back teeth of us entering wars, us being contributors of wars, and I think this cannot go on. And I think where Trump, hang on, where Trump is concerned, under his administration, we were on the brink of actually having a war with Iran. If Biden was in power, we would have seen bloodshed, catastrophic bloodshed. But you know what Trump did? He said, we're going to target one of their main men who is the cause of such contention, and we're going to take him out. And what that did was it sent a message to Iran, you cannot mess with us, and we can show you that without sending our troops, without sending our young men, and without bloodshed. And I want to see more of that.
Was that Khashoggi?
Can I just say...
Is that his name?
Yes.
Yeah.
You might call me a globalist. If being a globalist means that I think that Western countries should stand up when evil dictators prey on weak countries and weaker people to try and slaughter them, which is happening all over the world right now, Ukraine being the example I've given, if that makes me a globalist, then I am a proud globalist.
Well, what do you say to in 1994, where multiple countries in Europe actually agreed to not have a NATO expansion, and now what Putin feels is there is a NATO expansion? I'm not saying Putin's right. He's horrendous for going into Ukraine. But the reality is there are a lot on the other side that think differently. So we cannot be blinded by thinking we are this great West, that we can just continue to keep on fighting. What Trump is saying, he's not being a little man against Putin. He's being rational.
Okay.
He's saying we need to get round the table.
All right, Albie?
I think what people like Benjamin, and even myself to some degree, kind of internationalist thinking people need to do is really understand why people are attracted to people like Donald Trump and Nigel Farage. And on the point about globalist institutions, if we talk about NATO, it is right to say that a lot of the countries in NATO do not meet their defence commitments. It is an absolute disgrace that Europe cannot defend itself without America. That's a disgrace. How is it that European governments, after the post-war era, have not kept defence spending up? So we're now in a position where our security relies on America. That's a disgrace, and people need to focus on sorting that out rather than being angry at Donald Trump for being right on something.